Would you believe the car, the invention itself, has been around for over 100 years now? That's given rise to a very interesting phenomenon. Certain makes and models have woven themselves into our very culture. Cars like the Chevrolet Corvette or the Porsche 911 have been around for over 50 years. But when you think hatchback, econobox, you don't think 50 years. You don't think in the very fabric of our lives. That sounds like a commercial for cotton, but I digress. Anyway, this is the Volkswagen Golf. It started life 40 years ago, believe it or not, almost as long ago as the 911. And then they made the GTI, which came around 30 years ago. Effectively go-fast parts on the Golf. Now, it took them 7 years to bring this car over to the US, so in 1983, which this one is, it is a Mark I with a fancy sunroof, and it has the very interesting red interior. But there's a very interesting thing that's happened. It's gone over 6 generations, and here we are with generation number 7. I could sit here and go on about all the changes here, and we'll get to that stuff. But what's really important here is from this car to this car. Take a wild guess, the percentage that the performance version makes up of the overall sales of Golf. 5? 10? If you're really getting bullish, 15%? Actually, 40%. Let's find out why. So this is about the first couple of minutes I'm in this car. In most cars, you wouldn't just hop in and throw it around corners like this. But this is a GTI, which kind of sums up the whole point of the new GTI. It's really not that different in terms of practice, in terms of getting in and driving it. I kind of expected it to be like other GTIs, an incredibly balanced hot hatch. Look at this thing, 84 GTI. Look, it's a Rabbit, it's not even a Golf. Roll up windows, look at that, roll up windows. If that wasn't enough, I got a roll back sunroof, a crank sunroof. And it's not, and we're not talking like a glass or an Astro roof, it's a real metal, old school, German Schiebedach. Would you get excited if I told you you can get an extra 10 horsepower in your GTI? Probably not. What if you get an extra 10 horsepower and a limited slip differential? Would that get you excited? That's effectively what the performance package is. The performance package gives you this electronic limited slip differential with the extra horsepower, and it does what a limited slip should do. It takes the power and puts it on the wheel that actually has the traction. But here's where it's more like Volkswagen's new cousin, Porsche, than it is a Volkswagen. There is a limited torque vectoring system in here. It's brake actuated and effectively controls the yaw of the vehicle and works in conjunction with the electronic limited slip. What it eliminated was torque steer. Granted, it's a little bit sharper. It's got a little bit more power. There are parts of it that weigh less, but I think there are parts of it overall that weigh more. But the thing you notice the most is the torque. 258 pound-feet of torque instead of 207. That's a huge jump up. It's got some get up and go. Granted, it is significantly more disturbed. Oh! Wow, that hurt. Wow, this is some bumpy pavement. But what's interesting is this thing really isn't disturbed by this pavement at all. Incredibly balanced for this size car. Like you'd expect an S-Class to go over there like that, not a Volkswagen Golf. Thus far, you and I have been discussing front-wheel drive, two-wheel drive GTIs, the Mark 7. Now, if you've been following Volkswagen product cadence, what they usually do is they come out with a new Golf, and then 85 years later, they give us a Golf with all-wheel drive. And that's generally called something R, R32, or just R, like in the Mark 6. But what's going to change with the Mark 7 is something very interesting. What they're going to do is give us this car sooner. So instead of waiting the 85 years, we're going to see this actually in the calendar year 2014 for the model year 2015. It's still going to be 4-cylinder like the Mark 6 Golf R, but instead of 256 horsepower, just as a side note, I think it's very interesting that the torque rating on the new GTI is very close, a very similar number to the horsepower rating of the outgoing Golf R, but I digress. In any event, 292 horsepower out of a 4-cylinder, basically the same engine as in the GTI, and then it's going to go through all 4 wheels, 280 pound-feet of torque. Now, of course, we're going to drive that, get back to you on that. While we're waiting, another trivia question. What part of the world does this license plate correspond to? answer in the comments below or hit us up via our social networks. So I guess the question comes down to, what do you really expect when someone says GTI to you? Balance. It's the first thing that comes to my mind with a car like this, and that's saying a lot about Volkswagen engineering, what they did to make this car, because balance and front-wheel drive don't necessarily go together. At the end of the day, forget about the engineer, forget about technology. This thing's got this very cool torque vectoring thing in it. It's not just an individual technology, it's 30 years of refinement to get to the point you're at now. Because when so Mazda Speed 3, I think speed, which is great in the name, but I don't think balance. I think horrific torque steer. Hopefully they fix that on the next one. Which is, it's getting, what is it, almost a year now? I mean, where the hell is that car? So really the best way to think about this, let's put our mind back in 1984. If we were buying this car new, what else could you get that is a hatchback, somewhat affordable, actually this was affordable, and somewhat fun to drive? There was the Chevrolet Chevette, which was a complete and utter piece of garbage. I think it was a Festiva at that point. Not that exciting. No, this is pretty much it. No wonder why they sold so many of these things. And again, remember, the percentage of sales of the performance edition of the Golf, the GTI, is significantly higher than the percentage of, say, the Focus. Like, for example, the current Focus, maybe 5 or 10% of those will be the ST, where 40% of the Mark 6 Golf was the GTI. Come here. I want to show you one more thing. Look at this thing. Remember back in the day when there was a Volkswagen and Audi store? They still have that on the glass. It's exactly the kind of car you wanted on the roads of 1984. Hell, it's kind of the car you want to have today. It's just so much fun. Granted, the 7 is a luxury car on the inside. The 7, here's something really interesting to think about. The Mark 7 GTI today is nicer than the nicest Audi in 1984. So if you couldn't tell, I am back in San Francisco, and it's a great time to point out two things. Number one, if you go fast enough, you can get air. And number two, something I didn't expect to see on the Mark 7 Golf. Do you guys remember when we looked at the Conda Green Golf GTD? It was there for a short period of time to determine interest. Would people buy that in the US? There was one thing we weren't supposed to look at, and that was the adjustable suspension. They were very clear that's not coming over. Well, guess what this car has? An adjustable suspension. But it's not the 2-mode system like in the Conda Green car. It is, I would call it a 3.5 mode. It's like what you see in the Audis, where there's a normal and a sport, and then there's an individual setting, so you can make adjustments. Like you can make the steering sport, or you can make the steering soft and the engine sport. Now this has one unusual choice. The front lighting can change from sport to normal. I don't know what that has to do with driving the car in the city or in the canyons or up in the mountains like we did today, but you can change the lighting. Anyway, there is an adjustable suspension. Let's see if the air conditioning works. What do you think? I got a fan. Oh, it doesn't even have air conditioning. How many times have you ever heard the term, they don't make cars like they used to? I would like to enter Exhibit A. Look at the size of this engine. Look at the way this thing is set up. Granted, it's very simple, very cool, very nostalgic. Now, come over here. Look at the size of the engine in this 2015 model year car, built in 2014, designed in 2013. It's got tinfoil, insulation everywhere, much bigger motor mounts. So, I ask the question again. Do they or do they not make cars like they used to? Okay, so here's the script. For a new MotoMan film every week, click subscribe. And to get a sneak peek of what's coming up on the show, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, MotoManTV, all one word.